Hi guys, just purchased a Jackson Kayak Big Tuna, and I'm going to attempt the install of the rudder kit. Yeah, so far so good. I've got all pieces, everything came in, got the instructions, so let's get started with the first step. Okay, step one is to remove the existing foot rails, and we'll repeat this for the remaining three. Next step says to remove the two black nylon screws and install the rudder bracket with two 20 by 5/8 screws. Okay, so the next step says to drill a 9/64 hole on each side for the rudder control for the rudder lines. That's approximately 1/8 of an inch off the bottom of the radius and right in the center. So we'll drill this out now. And we'll repeat this for the other side. Next we'll drill a 5/32 hole in the recess right in the center of the stern. Towards the bottom. Okay, now I'm going to drill a 5/32 hole on the landing located on the starboard side of the hull. And this is where our rudder deployment line is going to run through. The hole is going to be centered, but it should be drilled close to the hull itself. Okay, next step is to draw a mark 1 inch off the bottom contour of the rear of the footrail depression. We're going to drill a 3/16 hole into the corner of the recess. And we're going to repeat this for the other side. Alright, next step is to drill out the two inner rivets on the pad eyes on either side of the rear oval hatch. Alright, after drilling out the rivets for the pad eyes, we'll clean out the inside of the hull. Okay, for the next step, I made a clean cut on the end of the tubing with a razor knife. We're going to melt the tip, and we're going to create a mushroom. Okay, then I'm going to use a reamer to clean the hole. Okay, I've cut a steep angle on the tubing in order to fish through the landing on the starboard side that we drilled the hole in. It's going to be a very tight fit, that way it'll keep it watertight. Okay, so we've got the tubing fished into the hull. Note about the tubing is that you won't be able to push it in through the hole from the outside of the hull. What you'll have to do is push a short distance in and go into the hatch in the back, and with a needle nose pliers I was able to pull the tubing through. What you want to do is pull it to where you have 1 inch from the tip of the tubing to the hull here. Put a 1/4 inch clamp in place, and what we'll do is we'll push it down into this recess that is provided for the clamp, and we're going to drill a 3/16 hole. That's our 3/16 hole, and what we'll do is we'll end up riveting this clip into place. Okay, next I used the string to line up the cleat for its placement with the tube. So once I have that lined up, then I can go ahead and put a mark. can drill 3/16 hole. Now what I did was I pre-drilled the cleat hole for the rivet because the hole is just a little too small. And that way, with the O-ring behind it, we can insert it into the hole that we just drilled. And this way it's got a snug fit. So what I'll do is make sure that we're lined up with the two. Remove the string, and I can drill the next hole. Install the second rivet and the O-ring behind it as that. Clean up the hole, and we can insert both rivets into the hull. Okay, and we can rivet both pieces in place. Okay, next we'll feed the 1/4-inch tubing through the back of the hull. You'll need some needle nose pliers to grab onto the end of the tubing to pull it through. It is very tight. As you pull it through, remember to keep the tubing on the outside of the rod holder on the starboard side of the hull. Okay, so now that we have the tubing pulled through the hull, we're going to cut the tubing flush with the back of the hull, and we're going to take a little bit of heat and mushroom the end of it. Certainly try not to burn the hull. And then we're going to go ahead and clean it out with a reamer. Alright, next step is to prepare the steering cable. What I did was lubricated the cable itself with silicone as per the instructions. I prepped the end of the housing by cutting it flush with a razor knife. The opposite end, I cut it at a sharp angle to allow it to feed through the hole in the back. We put the heat shrink in place, and it says to go ahead and heat the tubing until it mushrooms, and the heat shrink approximately 1/8 of an inch back from the tubing. Alright, so before we put the cable housing and cable into the hull, we've initially drilled the hole into the corner, which I think will give it too much of a transition going from the outside of the gunnel here and down into the hull. So what I wanted to do was make a shallower approach and slowly angle the drill towards the gunnel without rubbing the chuck against the side of the hull. And that'll give a smoother flow of the cable and the cable housing into the hull. Okay, so next I pre-drill the hole. Might be hard to see. Right down here, 3/16 hole, pull a little silicone in it. I pre-drilled a hole through the 3/16 clamp, and we'll attach it into place, push it in, and we'll make sure that our cable housing is positioned the way we want it. Right about there. And we'll get the rivet gun. Okay, now that's in place. It's nice and solid. We can clean up the silicone around it. I put a little bit in the hole where the cable goes through also, just because they gave me enough in that tube. So don't forget to put silicone in the center of the rivets, all rivets, on the side of the hull, inside the hull. Right, next, I've pulled the cable through the housing towards the bow of the boat. That way I don't have cable sticking out of the housing. We can go ahead and fish it in through from the inside of the hull to the hole that leads out and grab it with needle nose pliers to pull it through. Okay, now we're going to install or reinstall the rivets that we removed from the pad eye on each side of the access hatch. But before we put it in, we're going to place the 1/4-inch clamp with the flat side facing up on the black tubing below, which is a tubing for, or that we use to deploy the rudder. So we'll put it in place. Don't forget to install the supplied O-ring. We'll move the pad eye over, install the rivet. We'll push the clamp onto the rivet, and we'll go ahead and latch it down. Don't forget to fill the center of the rivet with silicone. And don't be a slob. Wipe up the excess, make it look good. And then we'll repeat it for the other side. Okay, now so we've got our clamp installed for our large tubing, the black tubing, and what I did is the small diameter tubing, the white one, I installed tie wraps, some good quality tie wraps to hold them in place. So as you can see, our clamp here, and as we move to the back, we've got a zip tied in place all the way to that transition. Now on to the next step. The instructions actually say to do this step before you anchor the steering housing and deployment housing inside the hull. But I felt a little bit better about having everything anchored in place and then do the cutting on the outside. So what you need to do is make sure that the steering cable is pulled far enough forward towards the bow. That way there's no cable sticking out back where you're going to cut. So what we want to do is make sure that our cut is about flush with the transom. It's about this position here. And we'll do the same thing on this side here. Alright, next step is to mount the slider on the starboard and port side. We will go from the inside edge of the foot track area, mark 1 3/4 inch out, and then we'll measure from this mark to the center of each hole. That way we can put our marks on the sliders and drill our 1/4 inch hole. So after taking the measurements from the 1 3/4 inch mark to the center of each hole along the slide location, I transferred the measurements to the slide here and at the end and laid it up against the gunnel where the slide location is to make sure that my marks match the holes. I went ahead and drilled the holes and attached the screws with the well nuts here and here. It'll go in the hole. Alright, and then we'll go ahead and mount the short screws into the recessed nuts, and we'll tighten down the screws with the well nuts, and the slide is mounted. Repeat for the port side. So next we're going to drill a 1/4 inch hole on the footrest rail, the one that we pulled off earlier to put the slide in place. Make sure that you choose the ones that have a mechanical or physical stop at the end here. Okay, so we'll drill that hole. And repeat this step for the other rail. Now we're going to install our binder post on the front side of the rail for the footrest. And before you put the screw into the binder post, put some Loctite on the inside or put it on the threads. We're going to attach the steering cable with the eyelet. Make sure the eyelet flat side is against the rail. We're going to go ahead and screw it into here. And again, don't forget the Loctite on there. And once you have it screwed together, you can tighten it up with Phillips screwdrivers. When you're finished attaching the cable, steering cable to the rail, we can go ahead and slide the rail onto the track and move it towards the bow. Next, we'll temporarily fasten the foot rail in place. What you want to do is move the rail all the way to the end of the track, and we'll put a piece of tape across and hold it in place, and that will allow us to set the rudder position when we're ready to adjust the cables on it. And next, we'll take our bungee, slide both ends through the eyelets. It's on the starboard side, and we'll tie an overhand knot. Alright, next is to run our rope through the black tubing and out the rear of the boat. Now we'll take the rope that we just ran to the back of the boat for the rudder, and the ball that comes in the kit. Make sure that the large opening on the ball is facing towards the bow, and we'll run the line through the ball and then around the bungee, and we'll leave enough for about an 8-inch tag line. And what we'll do is we'll tie a barrel knot. Okay, next I took a pair of needle nose pliers and put them in through the back side of the ball, opened them up, and inserted the rope into the jaws of the needle nose pliers to be able to pull the rope through. Then what we'll do is bring the ball all the way up to the front and tie another barrel knot. Later on, what we'll do is we'll trim the line back and torch it on the tip. That way it doesn't fray. Alright, before we move on to the next step, we need to attach the rudder blade to the rudder housing. The instructions don't cover this, but I've found some information on the internet that describes putting the rudder into position in the housing where the holes are lined up here. Okay, right up in this position here. Note that you have two holes here. That's for the posts on the back side of the shaft here. Those will go in that position. So what you want to do is insert the post and turn it over and line up the spring with the notch here. Alright, so we'll push it all the way through, but in the retracted position as you see it here, what we'll do is we'll turn the knob until the posts line up with the holes on the housing. Then what we'll do is we'll insert our cotter pin and then we're done. And it should look like this. Alright, at the stern of the boat, next what we're going to do is take our rudder assembly here and run your line that you just connected to the bungee cord and run it through the hole in the front part of the rudder housing and pull it through the back. Then what we'll do is take our nylon washer and put it onto the shaft and install it on the bracket. Okay, like so. Okay. Then what we'll do is pull the rudder down. It has a spring load to it, don't forget. And what we'll do is pull a small tension on the bungee and mark the spot. And after that, what we'll do is release the rudder. And in this position, we'll tie an overhand knot and then bring the rudder back down and reinstall it. Okay, now that we have the knot tied in our rudder line, we can pull the rudder down. Make sure the line is on the side, and we can attach the rope to the notch here, right? It'll go back up, and then we can attach our ring to the bottom of our shaft here. Now it's locked into position. Now later what we'll do is we'll take this rope and we'll cut it and we'll burn it on the end, that way it doesn't fray. In this step we'll install the cable housing, this piece here. We'll put it on the arm, put the pin through, and we'll attach the locking ring. Okay, next step, we will run the steering cable through the housing. Make sure not to crimp the cable, and then we'll run it back through to form a loop. We'll turn the rudder as far as it will go in that direction, and we'll insert the wedge in here. Okay, rudder as far as it will go over. We'll keep pulling on the cable until the wedge is in place. Then we'll install a cotter pin to keep the wedge in place. Now next what we'll do is remove the tape, and that will allow the rudder to come back in this position. Alright, before I cut the cable, I'm going to go ahead and bend the cotter pin over. That way it keeps it in place. Alright, now I've marked the cable at 1.25 inches. Now I'm using electrical cable cutters because I find they make a nice clean cut. That's in place, and with some crimpers I'll just crimp the thing down. Okay, and the heat shrink will go on, and we'll go ahead and shrink it in place. Then what we'll do is we'll repeat this on the other side. The installation of the rudder kit is complete. Let's take a look at the function. Steering. Nice and smooth in the up position. And back into the down position. Pedal movement is nice and smooth. No binding. And a really slick idea that they came up with to move from a solo position back to a tandem position, because my legs aren't long enough to reach that far, is the slide moves back and you'll remove it from the track. Push the back part of it out just a little bit, and what you'll do is you'll turn it around, turn the cable, make sure the cable's on the back side, and you slide it in the track, and it ends up being shorter. Then what you do, remove the foot pedal and move it back into your desired position. So now you have it in a shorter position towards the back in a tandem. So now my legs can reach.